into from around New Zealand, and a special welcome to anyone dialing in from our branches in Australia. I'm Nikki Sweetman, one of the RTSA New Zealand chapter committee members, and I'm based down in Christchurch. Firstly, we really want to thank you for coming along at lunchtime. We do appreciate how valuable this time is. And just before we start today's presentation, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about RTSA. So we are a Trans-Tasman organisation for anyone with a professional interest in railways, and we aim to provide technical topics of interest, support the business of the railway industry, support the continuing professional development of the members, and also to promote close working relationships amongst those in the railway industry. We hold regular face-to-face CPD events, webinars, training, education, awards, conferences, study tours, and we're always open to hearing about what events as members you'd like to see available. Special plug this time, we always welcome new members. So if any of you are listening who wish to join, the details of that are on our website. We just need a few more members to tip the 300 mark, so it would be really awesome if you are able to sign up if you're not already. And particularly to encourage others who are working in rail to sign up. We're super keen to get some more from KiwiRail, especially the grads. It's been really awesome to see a bit of an increase in grads coming along to the in-person events last year. So before we start today's presentation, I also wanted to remind everybody about Core 2025. So this is going to be held in Auckland on the 12th and 14th of August at the Pullman Hotel. There will be over 80 peer-reviewed papers and international keynote speakers addressing critical issues in railway policy, operations, and engineering. And again, all of those details are on the RTSA page. So today's presentation is Avondale-Southdown, the missing limb in the Auckland network, and this is presented by Gwyneth MacLeod. Gwyneth will share the vision for this corridor, which is owned by KiwiRail, and what this could mean for both connectivity and reliability for the rail network in Auckland, as well as efficiency gains for the national freight network. Gwyneth's the head of network strategy investment within KiwiRail's capital projects and asset development group. She joined KiwiRail in 2020 to establish its strategic metro investment function, focusing on infrastructure and investment needs of the metro networks over the short, medium, and long term. Her career prior to this was in corporate finance and strategy consulting, mainly in the UK and wider Europe. So I will now pass this over to Gwyneth, and then I will see you at the end for questions. Thank you, Gwyneth.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nikki. I guess where I'd like to start this, I'm conscious, in terms of who we've got online here, Railway Technical Society, but I think also perhaps Engineering Institute and maybe a few people also from urban development. So, a bit of an eclectic audience, and I hope there's something of interest for everybody in what I have to say. I'm sure there's a lot of people here whose minds will immediately go to, some of the technical aspects of this corridor. So I'm just going to say at the outset, we are at the very beginning of a process. So, the degree to which we can go to technical answers, let's see. So what we're staring at there on screen is an aerial view of the Auckland Isthmus with its existing rail network, or shall we say the developing network, because I've got the CRL on there as well. What's shown in red there is our missing limb, which is the Avondale to Southdown rail corridor. And that, of course, is the subject of today's discussion. So back in the 1940s, our predecessors understood the need for this rail corridor, and they not only planned it, but they bought the land. So this is something we've had for a very long time, and it is the only greenfield cross-isthmus transport corridor there is or ever will be in Auckland. So let's go straight to what's happening right now. We've had it for bordering 80 years, but we've decided for a variety of reasons that now is the time that we need to start planning for this corridor. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we got to that point, what's brought this to the fore, and about its strategic and economic importance, the connectivity it would bring, and how that would fit into Auckland's urban development landscape. We'll then conclude the presentation with a video that I hope will help people to visualize this a little bit, and then open for discussion. So let's get started, with what is happening now. As I set out, KiwiRail owns this corridor and it is designated for rail purposes. But that designation lapses in 2029, which in planning terms is not a great deal of time. It's not practicable to give the corridor effect across that time frame. To do so, we would need to have built it, or at least be largely on the way to that. So the aim has to be extending the lapse date, which itself requires that we are making progress toward building it. Fast track consenting legislation may help us across the next 18 to 24 months. We're planning a program of work to generate more information about the corridor, including developing our thinking on what it could be and what benefits it would provide. We're right at the start of that process. So, let's back up and have a look at how we got to this point. Across 2021 to 2023, KiwiRail and Auckland Transport jointly undertook a program business case to look at the needs of the rail system in Auckland across the next 3 decades. This video describes that result.
We all want to get around easily and efficiently. We want a choice about how we travel, and businesses want more choice on how they move their goods. A transport system that is reliable and meets demand. Our population and economy are growing, and with this comes more traffic congestion and more pressure on our existing infrastructure. KiwiRail and Auckland Transport have a plan. It's a plan that can adapt to future needs, allowing us to take more people and goods onto a world-class rail network and provide better transport options for commuters. The City Rail Link is nearly complete, and preparing for it has involved a huge amount of upgrades across the rail network. The plan over the next 30 years is to build on these improvements. More station upgrades will provide a better experience for commuters, and removing level crossings will boost safety and enable more frequent services. In the Southern Corridor, we're planning to create more capacity by extending the third main line and adding a fourth track to free up the network in its busiest sections. This will enable more frequent inter-regional services, as well as a new express service creating much shorter journey times and allowing more room for freight. A new cross-town east-west link through Avondale and Unehunga will also help decongest the inner city. Together, these changes will increase connections across Auckland, boost resilience, increase efficiency of our supply chains, and create a better, faster Auckland network. We're adding more new commuter trains to improve reliability, and KiwiRail's planned rollout of electric locomotives will help to create an even more sustainable network. This plan will deliver more capacity with commuter trains every 5 to 10 minutes and a new express passenger service from South Auckland, reducing travel time by half to just 45 minutes from Pukekohe to the city centre. But the plan goes further than Auckland. There would be better inter-regional connectivity to Hamilton, Northport and the Port of Tauranga. This plan is key to KiwiRail's national decarbonisation goals, helping to take more cars and trucks off the roads, reducing emissions and road maintenance costs, and delivering a stronger, more resilient, future-proofed network, enabling our city and regions to grow. So that's the plan, and it's going to take time to get it all done. But by planning now for the next 30 years, KiwiRail and Auckland Transport will deliver more efficient connections for people and goods, more transport choices, and reliable, faster journeys. creating a world-class rail system for Auckland and beyond. We all
Well, that was nice. So thinking about how we got to that plan, we started with demand forecasts, of course, as infrastructure planning always does. And what we found from this, I mean, look at this wonderful busy chart, is that we anticipate both rail passenger patronage and rail freight to more than triple across the next 30 years. This is, pure organic growth. And that also showed us that the network will run out of capacity for more train services in the mid 2030s. Maybe you can, start to, load your trains a little bit more heavily, but ideally, that's a point at which we really need to be starting to think about more capacity. So those volumes are great news, but equally, if a government wanted us to go faster, wanted to try to push mode shift in order to decarbonise or to decongest or any of those sorts of aims, we would be in trouble much more quickly. So ultimately, we've got a fairly near-term capacity problem that we need to start planning for now. So looking at the network itself, we have a mixed mode network in Auckland. Now, as I'm sure many people on this call are well aware, mixed mode networks are complicated, more complicated to operate than dedicated mode, and it's also less efficient. So I can hear people wondering, why don't you just segregate? And ultimately, that is what most countries around the world have done to solve the problem of mixed networks. But doing that takes time and it takes a lot of money. And the fact is, New Zealand is a small country in terms of population. Auckland is a small city in terms of population, and in order to justify duplicating networks, you really need to be a bit bigger. So, and once again, it also takes time. It's clear that that needs to be the aim across the long term, but we need a pathway to get there that makes the network work for all users in the meantime. So what came out of that PBC plan, as described in the video, was an entire system of improvements. We didn't just look at track, we didn't just look at trains or stations, we looked at the entire system and what is needed to make that work. I won't go through all of those things other than to call out, the big infrastructure elements needed was new track on the southern corridor and of course the Avondale-Southdown rail corridor, which is the key to making a lot of the rest of it work. This slide talks about the benefits of the whole program of investment in Auckland. So the whole program had a positive BCR, which is a pretty good result for a whole of system program across a 30-year period. The couple of things I'd like to highlight, though, are first that the investment needs to work and does work for all users. That's triple duty from every dollar, benefiting metro, interregional, freight markets all at once. And secondly, underlining again that every market needs to receive and create benefits to justify the sort of investment that we need in the Auckland network. So as you see in the center of the diagram, no single user comes close. It truly has to be benefits for everybody. The major achievement, I think, from that PBC was the emergence of a vision for what the network needs to look like into the future. And this is based very much around the segregation across time of different traffic types. So if we build the new track, we can start to see our pathway to segregating the corridors and the services that need to use the network. On the southern corridor, we aim to widen to 4 tracks from the current 2, 3 in the Westfield to Wirrie section. So what that will enable is us to run all stops metro on 1 pair of tracks, not getting in the way of anybody else, being freight, interregional and metro express services that all want to run fast. So you've segregated in that case all stops from non-stops. So that immediately will reduce the complexity of the network and increases its efficiency. But that isn't all it does. You know, if we look on the left side of the picture, a vision for a new North Island main trunk emerges from this, running instead of from Wellington up to Auckland and round the waterfront to Britomart and the Port of Auckland there, instead now running from Wellington up as far as Westfield and then skirting around the side of the central Auckland network up as far as Whangarei and Northport. This concept clearly also would support interregional passenger services, particularly from Hamilton, potentially in the future Tauranga, or even from Northland. But what it also does, if we then nip over to the right-hand side of the diagram, what it also does now is starts to free up that central network for dedicated metro, or almost dedicated metro. That is only possible with the Avondale to Southdown corridor in place. It is the key to making this work, or if not only possible that way, then the alternative is for tracking the entire network, which will take a very, very long time. So if we have Avondale to Southdown corridor in play, then it starts to make all this work. And that ultimately is why I call it the missing limb. So there's a few more details, about what this corridor unlocks for the wider network. Our predecessors understood this and they were right. On the subject of connectivity, I should add that metro passenger services could be operated in a variety of ways. We envisage this to be providing connectivity east-west across the isthmus, connecting, for example, or west-east, by the way, connecting, for example, from Avondale on the North Auckland line across Westfield Junction to the eastern corridor. So you now have the opportunity to cross the Auckland Isthmus on a single service without having to traverse the city centre. It starts to make the rail network operate as a network rather than a series of branches. So there we are. Bird's eye view again of the network. On the subject of connectivity, there's a lot more to be explored. We'll aim to have an initial look at this across the next 18 months or so. But the rail network isn't an island all of itself. It works within a wider transport network. So if we overlay there Auckland's bus network, we see that the bolder lines in there being the frequent bus network, and the finer ones are less frequent. And you get a pretty good idea just by looking at that picture of the connectivity options that could emerge from this. So, like the CRL, the Avondale to Southdown rail corridor could be transformational. As you can probably guess, an investment like this is costly. For the full program, across a 30-year period, the capital cost would be in the region of $21 billion. That's over 30 years, but it's still a lot of money. So we undertook a bit more work to try to understand what the impacts of investing this much money in one city might mean, including for the rest of the country. The analysis here is to 2100, and we chose that date because that is a 50-year period beyond the conclusion of the program. Big infrastructure takes time, and there would be no point trying to measure benefits halfway through building it. So we've gone for a 50-year horizon, which is fairly standard. And what we see from there is that constructing or doing the Auckland Rail program would create around about $6.5 to $7.5 billion in additional GDP. It would create quite a few extra jobs too, at close to 23,000. And the higher figures you see there, 7.3 billion and the 23,700 additional FTEs would arise if you did Avondale-Southdown a little bit earlier. The other thing I guess I'd draw a bit of attention to here is the emissions impact. In this instance, we're not just measuring emissions reduction from mode shift, which is what many people in many business cases will do, but forgetting about construction. The fact is that building infrastructure creates emissions. So does making people richer. We create additional GDP, people have got more money, people travel more. So this program does all of those things, and it still would lower carbon emissions from what they would be otherwise, and that is largely because of the mode shift, particularly on rail freight, but also passenger to a lesser extent. And critically, the benefits don't just accrue to Auckland. What we see in this chart is a breakdown of where we think the benefits, the economic impacts would be spread across the economy. And that's in large part due to the mixed nature of the network. Because we have interregional services, we have freight services, the benefits get spread. Equally, just the fact that you are constructing things has benefits to the rest of the country. In my view, at least, so the personal view, but I think that this creates a very strong case for national investment because the benefits accrue nationally, not just to one city. Now, this slide, of course, is also technically about the entire program, not just Avondale-Southdown, but it was a look at what would happen if we delivered this element of the network just a little bit faster, 5 to 6 years sooner, so let's say early 2040s. And the answer is that it increases the benefits for everybody. So we have a GDP impact. 50 years on, that's nearly $1 billion higher than it would be if you did this at the end of the program. In this instance, the greatest beneficiary is Auckland, and that's largely because you would get that connectivity boost a great deal sooner. So there you have it, the missing limb in the network, and the key to increasing its connectivity is the Avondale-Southdown corridor. I'm equally conscious that it's not just about connectivity, it's about resilience, it's about reliability, and this network, this corridor as part of the wider network is key to delivering those things. And it's not just all about transport and connectivity either. The Avondale-Southdown corridor has an important urban context. What you can see on this view of the corridor is how it works with urban development. urban developments that are already underway in Auckland. The idea for passenger services is that we're connecting the western and eastern corridors via Mount Roskill and Onehunga. That means that we would be connecting the two major priority development areas on the Auckland Isthmus, being Mount Roskill and Tamaki, which are outlined in yellow on this map. We would also be providing a linkage through Onehunga, which is one of Panuku's developments, and skirting several others. So the corridor has an urban development context that I think is very difficult to look past. So we're almost at the end of my monologue here. You know, we're starting to make moves on some work to plan this project, and we're also starting to talk to people about it. For a variety of reasons, including that lapsing designation, making 2029 a target date, it's time to start moving on planning. So at the end of last year, we took a few folks out on the corridor, and we're continuing to do that, by the way. But one of those was a journalist, Lloyd Burr, who wrote an excellent article that you can find on Stuff. And concluding my monologue here is video that accompanies his article. So we'll run that and then perhaps open up to a few questions.
When something is made well.
Oh, sorry about that.
For over 50 years, it's made to last. It's made.
There had to be a hit somewhere,
the
right?
topography is hilly,
Now there's
the
gonna be
gradient
another.
relatively steep. Auckland's next rail revolution will rumble through. It's been on the plans for 70 odd years, and a handful of KiwiRail planners are giving me a tour of the 11-kilometre route.
It's been on the books forever for most people living here, and I think there was a view that, and it will never happen. And we've got to get that view correct. It will happen.
This is where it'll go. It starts at the southern line at Southdown and cuts through the industrial area at Te Pāpapa, where there'll be a new station. From here it cuts across the current Onehunga line through a residential area to a new Onehunga station. It winds its way up past Onehunga High School, through some paddocks past Bunnings, and follows the western motorway to a new station at Mount Roskill, where there are 3 schools. It hugs the motorway for another kilometre or so to the final new station at Wesley, before it cuts over the top of the Waterview Tunnel to join up with the western line at Avondale. Here is the view from above. We can see it significantly boosts Auckland Metro's network and opens up a huge part of the city to rapid rail transit, as well as allowing freight trains to bypass the busy central city network.
The predominant use of this line will be routine passenger services. Freight will be an important user of it, but by far the greatest frequency will be passenger trains. In fact, if it was just a freight bypass, I'm not sure it would ever really get off the ground.
The terrain will provide a challenge. This is KiwiRail land just above Onehunga High School. The topography is hilly, the gradient relatively steep, and would require significant earthworks.
We had some very wise predecessors. They bought enough land for us to gradually curve our way up. There's a lot of earth to move, but there's a lot of cut to do, and a lot of fill to do. So moving it around, we've got to work through that, and the build will be disruptive.
This is the view from the summit of Mount Roskill. The lines would run parallel to the motorway here. On the other side, it would ease congestion and would open up all of these houses to a new way of getting around.
If you're going to develop a city in Auckland, there's only one corridor running east-west in Auckland, and we're standing on it. No others are possible.
While the corridor is designated as rail, there's a lot of work to do, like clearing native trees, building bridges over streams or extending existing overbridges, and it cuts across 27 roads. And it'll cost a bomb.
It's in the billions of dollars for development. When you look at the benefits and you look at it as a passenger railway rather than a freight railway, and you look at having a station close by and the intensification of the urban environment and fixing some of the sort of infrastructure issues in Auckland, then it's got legs.
And money well spent.
That's not the only problem though. While the government's put it on the fast track for consenting and has put $3.9 million towards that, there's no money allocated to actually building it.
There we have it. Over to you, Nikki.
Thank you so much, Gwyneth. That was a fantastic presentation. It's really great to see the videos, so you're able to actually see it a lot clearer in person. Okay, so on the bottom on your screens, you will have there's a Q&A button. You are welcome to put questions in there. I see we've already got quite a few questions already. You can pop in and read the questions that others have already asked, and there is the option to upvote. So Daniel Hedefin, our committee chair, and myself, we will be running through the questions for Gwyneth. Okay, the first question that we have is, 30 years seems too long to implement this project. Could we phase this to start with a more quick win of an initial Mount Roskill spur, so Wellesley, Mount Roskill station?
Okay, 30 years, I absolutely agree with you, that's far too long if we were just talking about this one project. The 30 years was in fact the entire rail program. So if we were looking just at the Avondale-Southdown corridor, I think that could be done substantially faster than that. Realistically, how long would that take to get it in? I don't think you could do it faster than 10 years. That's you know, just an opinion. I suppose it depends, you know, how much you know, how determined people are and how much money they've got to speed it along. The idea though of building in stages, I think one would find that you've got very limited benefits from doing that. You know, where this corridor really starts to create those benefits is by providing the connectivity right across east-west and by enabling us to move services out of the center of the network. So my inclination is to say, yes, we could do it a lot faster than 30 years, but whether or not staging it to operational level is maybe something that one would need to have a solid think about.
Great, thank you. The next question is, will KiwiRail also consider including wider economic benefits? Sorry, the question just disappeared. The people are upvoting, so the questions are flicking around all over the place. I'm sorry. Will KiwiRail also consider including wider economic benefits associated with urban transformation along the route?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So across the next 18 to 24 months, you know, we're aiming to do enough work to elaborate what this could be. Now, we're very conscious that, you know, some of the development or some of the corridor will be at grade, and that's particularly up the Wesley, Mount Roskill end of the corridor. And it will be following developments that are already underway there. There is potentially, you know, some more that would spring up because of building the corridor. Down at the Onehunga end, the corridor is far more likely to, you know, I mean, we know that the gradients there, you know, it's a very hilly part of the networks. We know that there's going to be a lot of cut and fill. I can imagine that parts of the network down there may entrenched. So this starts to create the potential for quite a lot of urban regeneration and development. So absolutely, we will be looking at that and starting to imagine what it could be. At this stage, we haven't done it, but that's our forward work program.
It's not so much of a question, maybe a statement. It's that we are still missing the Wiri Airport Anihanga route to cater for airport freight and passengers, which could relieve the main core lines. I'm not quite sure what the question is, or whether you have any comment on that.
I think, the question of an airport link with the Southern Rail corridor is one where, it's a question because we have currently 2-track railway that we expect to be full. So if you start to run services to the airport, then you're going to cannibalise from somewhere else. That's services either that won't be continuing on to Pukekohe, or where else can you take the slot from? So then we say, well, could it be Manukau branch line? Should we reduce services there instead? So that is the sort of trade-off question that has to be asked if we were talking about the Southern Corridor. Now, if on the other hand you imagine that Avondale-Southdown has been built, and potentially across time so has Airport to Botany, then might it make sense, for example, to extend that busway up through Mangere and connecting to the Avondale-Southdown corridor? That's something that, as a 2D picture on a page, is certainly something that I think would be a reasonable question into the future. But let's get it built first.
The next question is, the business case was written up with light rail in mind before it was cancelled. How does the cancellation of that project affect this plan and the associated BCRs?
Not very much, to be honest. So the program was built with indeed light rail, the expectation that light rail would be there, but you have to figure that what the Avondale-Southdown corridor does is very different to what light rail was aiming to do. I mean, they were looking to share part of the corridor, but their purpose was getting from city centre down to airport, and broadly speaking, as fast as possible. This corridor instead is aimed at connecting east-west across the isthmus. So the catchments, the trips that people are trying to do are entirely different. If you're somebody in Wesley and you want to get across to Sylvia Park, for example, well, you weren't going to get on light rail to do it because it was going to the airport. So, and likewise with this,
Yep.
if you're trying to get to the airport, well, technically, yes, you could interchange with the rail corridor elsewhere to do it, but there was not a lot of cannibalization between the two of them because they were trying to do different things. So ultimately, what does light rail not being there do for us? And the answer is that it doesn't affect it at all. We were standalone, with the possible exception, of course, that with enabling works that would have needed to have been done together, the opportunity for synergies, of course, isn't there if you're not running in the same time frame, and that would have, it would in fact have given effect to our designation. So that does leave us in a position where perhaps we need to go a bit faster.
There's quite a few questions relating to, I guess, benefits further than Auckland. One of the questions is, how does the A to S link provide such high economic benefits as far south as North Canterbury?
Well, it comes down, so the analysis that we did there was using a computable general equilibrium model, which is basically a model of the New Zealand economy. And I quite like those things because they look at economic impacts on a net basis. So it models what happens in the New Zealand economy if you do one thing or do another thing. It recognizes that if I spend, $1 billion on one thing, then I can't spend it somewhere else. And also that, there are always going to be, let's say, winners and losers. If I spend a lot of money on a transport project, then maybe I'm not spending that money on a mining project or some other infrastructure. And if you start constructing a large transport project, then that draws things from other parts of the economy. So it's modelling through what the impacts would be, both positive and negative, on a range of sectors and also geographically. So, for example, you might find, and I think from memory we did find, that in Wellington, for example, you would have a lot of professional services that were, in fact, working through to this project. So that analysis is online in full on KiwiRail's website, and I would very happily provide a link to it.
Brilliant. So this will be the last question from me, and then I'll hand over to Daniel for the rest of the questions. So the question is, what happens when the designation runs out? Is there an extension?
That's the $1 million question, really, isn't it? So as things stand, under the Resource Management Act, there is a possible, there's only two ways to make this designation secure under existing processes. One is to give effect to the designation, for which we would probably need to be well underway with at least enabling works. The second way is to seek an extension of the lapse date, and that's provided for in the RMA. And in order to be able to extend the lapse date, one needs to be making significant progress towards giving it effect. So, what does that mean exactly? Will certainly be things like continuing our planning, making the corridor whole, perhaps some consenting, design, clearing the corridor, giving effect to designation conditions. So it's a body of progress, if you like, toward giving it effect. And the implication then, of course, is you are on your way toward building it. I think that's about as far as I can go at this stage. There's obviously things in the pipeline in terms of updates to the RMA and so forth, but until we actually see what those are, that's the best we have at this point.
Awesome. And I think Nikki's shooting off. Thanks heaps for that, Nikki. It was handled that like a pro. We've still got over 180 odd people left, and we've still got questions. We'll keep going till 1 o'clock. I don't think we're going to get through them all, so if you're still watching, do the like thing, and that'll prompt me as to which question to ask next. This one I'm going to combine a couple of them. It's about support. So does this project have enough political support, with the potential that it's going to be across changing of governments, right? It's going to go across several terms. There's a piece about adding in local government, and also someone's mentioned customers. So there's commuter type groups, lobbyists, and big freight customers that and freight users that might have an interest. So I've covered a few off there, and
Yeah, you have, haven't you? So let's start where you started. Do we have enough political support? Well, this is building at the moment, and it's a lot of the reason, besides moving toward securing the designation. It's also one of the reasons that we're aiming to do the sort of work that will elaborate what this corridor could be. And that's, ultimately, if people know what it is, what it could be, that I hope will certainly, develop a great deal more support for the project. I think this is something that has a lot of economic benefit for New Zealand. So it also potentially has a lot of, public service benefits. It has, urban benefits. It has, all of your emissions reduction benefits. There's a lot in here, a lot to develop, to explain and to unpack. So that is our task across the next, 24 months, is to get ourselves into a position where we can have those conversations with a lot more information behind it. And I would certainly hope that that will generate, quite a lot of broad support for going ahead.
Cool, yeah, and there's no rail project in Auckland of any significance that's not gone across different governments of different types. They've all gone through changes in government. One on the designation, in that does it need to be changed? And there was no, is it only for freight? Are you able to say much about what that designation covers and modifications that might be needed?
Okay. So I mean, there's a couple of things with the designation. I mean, we own already almost all of the land we need. You can see that it's sitting there on screen in front of us. You can see it's a funny shaped little corridor, and that's largely because this was purchased many years ago, piece by piece, on a willing buyer basis. So it's not a regularly shaped corridor. It's also something where KiwiRail is a very good NZ Inc. citizen. The idea of light rail sharing part of the corridor, they're not the first. The Waterview Tunnel is sitting straight in the middle of this designation. And we're in a process currently with NZTA just to, the agreement there was that KiwiRail would share its land and NZTA would, also share in order to make that corridor good. So into the future, yes, we need a little bit more land, but it's not that, in the context of the whole, it's quite a small amount. And the last part of your question that I recall there, is it only for freight? And the answer is absolutely not. This is a passenger railway. That's the main thing I've hoped to be talking about today is the connectivity this would create. We think there is sufficient, or there would be sufficient space on a 2-track railway. It will operate exactly the same as the rest of the network, which is, to say up to around about, 8 passenger trains each direction per hour, and probably, 5 to 8 at most. Well, who can ever say at most? If we're looking at 200 years, who knows? But a small number of freight trains across the course of the day. Which would effectively be between Auckland and Northland. Now, whether or not you ever get any interregional passenger trains on here, it's, I think time would need to tell that story.
Cool, and you've actually answered another question there. Someone asking, you sure it's a passenger, not just a freight? And I think something people should remember is when this was initially put in place, the focus on passenger in the network back then versus freight, and it's only been in prior to the last 20 years, that Auckland decayed and didn't have the focus on passenger it now has as a network. Hey, got some ones that not sure, because you said you might not have some of the technical details. So these are a bit around alignments and such. So through Onehunga, is the routes, do you know if it's set? Because there's an interest in all those level crossings that are through there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is again something we need to work through across the next 18 to 24 months. I'll say once again, this is a passenger railway. So whilst you might sort of think about alignments that go around Onehunga, that would tend to undermine the purpose of the railway. It's here to provide passenger connectivity east-west, linking with all of the bus routes. And you kind of defeat the purpose if you put the railway where there are no people. So, ultimately, starting premise is you would go for the designation that achieves those aims, and that you happen already to own. Now, that doesn't mean that alternative routes shouldn't be looked at. I mean, if you found that something else ultimately was going to do the job better or be significantly cheaper or something like that, then, clearly you're going to move a little bit. But yeah, starting premise is which, looking to build the corridor as owned and designated and planned for the last few decades.
Cool. The next one was a bit of a two-pronged. I'm not going to actually ask the Westfield Junction because you've actually answered a bit of, but the comparing the benefits of this versus the four tracking, and that is Westfield to Pukekohe. Is that something that you have any insight or information on?
The one compared to the other, no, we
Yeah.
haven't looked at it in that context, no.
Okay. I had an extension to that question, which comparing this to anything else that's transport-wise planned in Auckland, or is that something that KiwiRail has a feel of the scale of benefits of this versus some other, the next big roading job or so?
Not specifically. I mean, nobody's gone out and done a line by line comparison. I think the thing about this corridor is, aside from that, I mean, it's twofold, I guess. One is this does multiple jobs, and I personally, it is my personal view that if you're talking about very large sums of money, as we would be, then everything needs to do more than one job. Now, this corridor is very important to making the rest of the rail network in Auckland work. It's also very important to Northland and to Waikato, Bay of Plenty, in particular. So it's not all just about getting people around Auckland, although it is absolutely also about that. So you have those two elements to begin with. Beyond that, as I said, this is your only greenfield cross-isthmus corridor. A lot of it, I imagine, is going to need to move a lot of earth around, and potentially put part of this railway into a trench. And that creates a lot of potential urban development opportunities out of it. So my expectation, as I said, once again, personal view, is that this is possibly the best opportunity in the country, or certainly would be, amongst the top few for attracting private sector investment. And, in that sense, I mean funding, not just finance. And why is that? Is because there are opportunities here particularly around the urban development, that can help pay for the project. So from that point of view, does it do things that many others can't? And the answer is yes. And one of the main reasons for that is we had very, very clever forebears who bought the land. So the risk of speculation and value capture escaping the public purse is significantly lower. I'm not saying other people won't benefit, just saying that the taxpayer or whomever else is investing in this has a very strong opportunity to capture a lot of the land uplift and other urban benefits that would arise. So from that point of view, is it, is this corridor more important than many others? And yeah, I would argue for all of those reasons that yes, it is.
Cool. And you've covered a couple that are on the list, and including part of the next one I was going to ask, but I'll still ask a piece of it. So you mentioned that the potential for it's gaining investment from various or ways of getting investment from various places, specifically things like what it's noted Hong Kong and Denmark believe to do around land value taxes and such. Is that something that KiwiRail in this stage looks into, or is that something that it's an opportunity for others as project progressors to look into? Because I guess we don't create the legislation in KiwiRail.
No, we don't. We don't. And I think, as we sort of set out at the beginning, the first step here is to create more information about what this corridor could be and what the investment opportunity might be. So that sits across the next 18 months. It will be comparatively high level information, but it will be enough, I think, or I hope it will be enough that we're able then to start having those conversations. So not only generating the political interest and understanding of what it could do, but equally investor interest in whether or not this is something that people would be willing to invest in, and on what terms. So once again, we're at the beginning of that process, and let's see where it goes.
Cool. And I'm just because this might be the last one. I was just trying to see which, because there's a couple that have been partially answered. It's the top rating one, and sorry, this could be a little bit of a cool question. Ferry rail links to the South Island, the benefits that are shown in the South Island regions. Any thoughts on impact of rail enablement across the strait and how that might affect those types of benefits?
Oh, Dan.
Too tough. The people voted.
That's a loaded question, isn't it? I think as anybody, you must understand that the efficiency of freight and logistics throughout the country, as well as externally, are critically important. I wonder personally at times, when we talk about those sorts of connections, what the impact of inefficiency would be on our cost of living and so forth. I think I will, I mean, I think everybody wonders those sorts of things, and this is live political questions at the moment. So I'm not in a position of knowledge really on a lot of that. What I would say though, in terms of what we expect the impacts on the South Island economy to be, I think after this call we really must share the links to that economics report, which is on KiwiRail's website, you get a pretty good idea of the sectors likely to benefit from it and which ones of those would also be affected by the efficiency of your Cook Strait crossing.
Oh, hey, that was a mean question from me to finish with, but you answered it awesome. So that's a great answer.
You can pay me later.
We've got past one, so we still had some questions. We've still got 130 people online. It shows the super amount of interest. We had over 210 at a point during this, and I know more than 300 registered. So all of those people will get sent out a video. Gwyneth, that's one of our more well attended and certainly number of questions to go the full hour. Shows the level of interest that you've generated, and there's a ton of information that you've been able to put out there. So thank you heaps for that. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And we hope to see people at the next RTSA event, and we hope to see as many as possible at the core event later this year in Tamaki Makaurau up in Auckland. Thanks everyone, and bye.
Wonderful. Thank you.